The House of the People is an initiative from Assemble, a group born from the climate movement, people who've taken direct action in recent years to ensure the climate emergency remains in the public consciousness. Before the 2024 general election, Assemble coordinated with people around the country to set up local assemblies. These were meetings open to the public, where people could come together to deliberate on important local, national and international issues and on the potential solutions to them. Assemble also backed a number of independent candidates in the election, forging a loose alliance with other groups like Collective and Reliance. And on the 11th of August, Assemble launched the House of the People in London, designed to bring together representatives from local assemblies around the country. The Canary went down to London for the launch, and what follows is a collection of video clips and images taken at the event.
The public is locked out of politics. While the lobbyists and right-wing think tanks have taken over the show, the social contract between the people and the rulers has been broken. So-called democracy under capitalism has concentrated power in the hands of a few who have undue influence over policy making, trust and regulation. Trust in the system is at an all-time low, and we see fascism overwhelming our streets and in our elections. But citizens' assemblies are the keys we need to upgrade and free democracy. So today we're going to imagine together that a representative snapshot of the British public has been called together in the brand new chamber that we assemble a building, the House of the People, a permanent citizens' assembly to rival and replace the House of Lords and the House of Commons. We will spend today discussing what we want the agenda to be at that first meeting of the House of the People. To decide, we will discuss two questions today. What do you think are the most important issues for the House of the People to discuss? And what do you not trust politicians to deliver on for our country? Today we will talk about what connects the issues we face and the pressing priorities for our communities right now in the face of corporate greed, irreversibly devastating the climate, public services being slashed, rising inequality, poverty and genocide. The true antidote to toxic politics is an upgraded democracy fit for this century, not participatory democracy as a tool for enhancing the reputation of the political establishment and finding out what people will tolerate. Rather, we need a new embedded kind of political experience into the fabric of our society and to put trust at the heart of transformation. Assemblies offer a paradigm shift to a new, deeper form of civic equality and inclusion. There is overwhelming evidence that when people come together around new and progressive policies, when they're actually given the chance to choose a future for themselves as equals, they do. And we know what is best for our communities. Participatory democracy is a way of increasing polarisation against the political elite and rallying a movement around a restored faith in the competence of people over our political class. Assemble has run dozens of people's assemblies already, and today we will see the results from these assemblies together and draw out a concrete list of issues to prioritise and take forward to the House of the People.
There is one thing that we do all agree on, which is that we don't trust our political system to have our best interests at heart. And we don't trust political parties to listen. We don't trust politicians to be honest. We don't trust the Lords to speak for us. And we don't trust that Parliament can deliver change on the biggest issues, to close the gap between the rich and the poor, to support our public services, to keep them alive, to provide homes for us, or to confront the climate and nature emergency. You know, that one where temperatures are rising faster than we've ever seen. Tomorrow is going to be the hottest day of the year. You know, where these changes are causing life support systems in our Earth system to flicker towards collapse, and a quarter of plant and animal species threatened with extinction. And I guess, perhaps, some of us are also here because we're wondering to ourselves, what power do we actually have? I mean, as a public, we've observed coronation after coronation of new leader. And even in this last election, you know, I ask, like, did we really have a choice there? Did we really have a choice when a party comes in with such overwhelming power, with only 20% of the public voting for them? Where you have a Green Party which received a fifth of the votes but won 1/100th of the seats. And then there's the millions more that voted for Reform UK, isn't there? And received just as little representation. Like, what happens then? What happens when the food gets too expensive and everything is broken and you can't trust anything out their lips? And the banks and the businesses make billions and towns are stripped of their prospects. Like, what happens then? Because I think we saw some of it over the last week, right? We saw in our streets, outside our mosques, outside our asylum centres, violent, racist rioting overlapping almost exactly with the areas of greatest deprivation and disillusionment in the whole entire country, where Muslim believers, communities who have roots in Africa and Asia are demonized and attacked and blamed for a system that hasn't been serving people, cover for a captured politics that's just serving itself. And we all know it, and we all fear for our future, we fear for the far right, we fear for the elite powers that be, but there's another power that be, one we're not always reminded of. Some people, they call it people power. Our collective voice, you might say, our collective voice for justice. If only we could find it. That's the hard bit, right? For us all to find that collective voice. But it shows itself. It comes through sometimes, through the community, the outpouring of love that we saw in the wake of those recent riots. And in other ways, in so many ways, it's woven into a long tradition behind us of courageous suffragettes and the Chartists before them who knew that something wasn't right, that they deserved a say, who weren't afraid to challenge the authority of the elites at that time of day. So, you might be wondering who are we, the organisers of this event. So, we're a group, we're called Assemble. We've emerged from the pointy end of the climate movement. We believe in science, we believe in people, we believe in a better way, an update, an upgrade to shape the national debate. We believe we need to demonstrate how our democracy should function. And we believe that, as Molly just said, that the antidote to our toxic politics is an updated form of democracy which uses assemblies. We need to embed a new kind of political experience in our society. Because the answer lies in people coming together, ordinary people, listening, learning, refusing to be divided, refusing to let decisions be taken on our behalf. I mean, assemblies, people's assemblies, popular assemblies, forums, meetups, like, call them what you like. They create space to talk about your city, your country, the problems, what's going wrong, what you want to see better. And they produce a charter of 5 demands which, for what you want for your council, for what you want for your representative, and what you want your MP to be truly standing for. They provide a vehicle for action. And in the general election, we collaborated with 26 different independent campaigns. Some of these candidates are here today, citizen-led candidates who decided to run on a platform of assemblies on a need to upgrade our entire political system. But assemblies, they aren't just talking shops. They nurture a shared voice, but they can lead to concrete action, like what happened a few months ago in Cornwall, where assemblies led to an occupation of the council. They now have a regular channel to talk to the council through assemblies. And this is because people can collectivise when they're all in the same room, the power of being in a physical crowd. When there are more people in your presence, you gain courage to challenge power, to act with others in the moment. People can decide on campaigns involving striking on energy bills, on water bills, on rents. People can move into occupations or rallies or a whole host of non-violent direct action. But assemblies that happen on a local level need to have a national story. We need a national voice which is greater than the sum of all those local ones. And so for that we need a new home for that voice. We need a new institution, a house of the people that is a permanent citizens' assembly for inclusive decision making, where people are selected like a jury, they serve the interests of the nation, they listen to scientists, they make decisions for the common good. Something that would challenge Parliament's authority, a parallel parliament. Regional and citywide local assemblies, they explore difficult problems in depth, and they produce reports which are carefully considered in this new house. And you build a network of institutions, an ecology of new institutions. And it ultimately works, this House of the People, to produce 5 demands, to unite a broad social movement. It would fundraise and meet regularly. Half of the 300 or so members could come from the grassroots of the movement, from local assemblies. Anyone would have the opportunity to put their name in a raffle and be picked to serve. The other half of that chamber then can be taken from the public at large using careful statistical methods to make sure that an accurate snapshot of the public is represented in that entire chamber. And it would hear from expert voices and testimonies from those who would be affected. And it would be able to escape the narrow, let's say, framing that is offered to us by the news, the media, our political establishment. It can open up about what's possible. And members of this House can become spokespeople for the project, for the 5 demands, for the need for political and democratic renewal. So the idea is that this is something that we work towards, and we build a mandate, we continue to return, and ultimately this House would continue to meet in the future until the Lords, the feudal, the outdated House of Lords would be replaced with a House of Citizens, an even better version of the House of the People, which should be embedded in our political system through a proposal that's come from the experts of Citizens' Assembly's Sortition Foundation. So it would review laws, it would set the agenda for Parliament, it would scrutinise politicians, see how they get their funding from, hold them to account for the things that they say, all the things that we know we need. This House is, is something that we can build towards, but today, we're not passive here. You've been listening for about 20 minutes. Thank you for your patience. We'll be wrapping up in a moment, but the day is really all about you and your involvement. We're here to think and to imagine and to talk about a better way to run our entire country, about the biggest, most urgent issues of our time that need to be addressed. We'll hear the results from what's already happened and chart a forward course. And we're here to be the start of something that we should pray will never end. And we can relax, remembering that actually it's not really the start of anything. Assemblies of people coming together to solve problems, to listen, they've been done for millennia, for centuries. Whether that's over countless indigenous cultures or the birth of democracy in Athens itself. We can solve problems, we can listen, and today is just the beginning. Democracy doesn't happen in one day, despite what you may have learned. it's a practice, and today we're going to practice. And our aim is to inspire you all to believe in a different way, a different vision of the future where, despite it all, we can come together, we can bridge the divide, we can unite and wrestle what power we can.
So assemblies are all about deliberation, and what this means is talking through the issues together and coming to some kind of agreement together. So notice this is a very different type of thing to a debate. In debates, what we're doing is trying to win against the other person, right? It's a competition, right? And what deliberation is about, it's about collaboration, so it's a fundamentally different thing. So notice how different that is from doing our current way of politics. So, as part of this process, the discussion will happen in small groups as you're sat all around these tables. So there's going to be 2 small group discussions today, and in between those, there's going to be some breaks, there's going to be some feedback, where you'll get to hear what all of the other tables have been talking about as well.
So please be kind, respect each other, and try to understand people's point of view. As I said, this is deliberation, this isn't debate. So it's okay to disagree, but let's try and disagree well. And finally, everyone has an equal say. So no voice is more important than any other, irrespective of where you come from, your ethnicity, how your level of education, you know, what job you do, all these things are irrelevant. Everyone has the same voice here.
At the event, participants got these booklets, giving more information about the House of the People, and inside was the first question for each table to deliberate over, which was, what do you not trust politics to deliver for our country? Notes were taken and later put up around the room. The Canary sat at one table to observe, and you can read more about that in the article accompanying this film.
Many of our friends, activists, imprisoned for standing up for the climate, for their anti-fascist work, and please keep those things in mind when you listen to the song. The song is so powerful in naming people's distinct experiences of labour, and that we, the many, must realise our collective power to unmake the few, the wealthy elite. It expresses the need for radical social transformation and consciousness to overcome the exploitation of our labour and the division elites see between us. It teaches that in order to achieve economic justice, it is necessary to redistribute political power and wealth to overcome domination. So from Chartism to the abolition of slavery, to the suffragettes, the civil rights movement, the apartheid movement, the movement for indigenous land rights, girls' education, queer rights and reproductive rights, even winning the working week. The pattern of history tells us that our democratic freedoms were never handed to us. They were hard fought by ordinary people who have given us our rights. But just as they were won, they can be taken away. Our democratic rights are constantly under assault, and much social violence was never truly abolished, only reformed and institutionalised. Protest and us coming together is the reflection of the public feeling unrepresented in politics, especially groups who are overlooked and ignored. To be heard, citizens have always banded together in solidarity, demanding their rights and designing them for the
themselves. Westminster's Public Order Act makes clear that political elites want us to think that coming together to protect our rights doesn't work. People in power are afraid of change and do not want to be held accountable. But by standing together in our assemblies, we bring the power to us. We don't just deserve better, we can do better. That is what Assembly stands for. These assemblies feeding into the alternative chamber of democracy to sustain mass non-violent civil disobedience could achieve transformational change. So, what is Assemble's electoral strategy? We know that trust in politics is broken. Only 20% of voting age people actually voted for the government that we currently have in power. Political parties and the current state is not fit for purpose. It is undemocratic and centred on using policy and legislation to increase profit. The people currently represented by electoral politics are the most privileged in the UK, and those who stand to gain the most from a genuine democracy are those who are marginalised right now. They don't represent us. And while Assemble doesn't see deep change from coming solely from elections, because we can't afford to wait until the next general election just to win more seats within the corridors of an institution bankrolling multiple crises. We need access to achieve transformation. So Assemble endorsed 28 candidates in the general election, reflecting a broad coalition from the ex-Labour left, the climate movement and the Muslim community. Any new party needs a mandate from a broad base. The first parties for mass social change were backed by relatively unified labour movements, and assemblies are a means to reaching these people. Rather than just rallying votes for candidates to win, we regularly trained and funded local people who scrutinised and co-authored their candidates' manifestos. This tactic of holding freely accessible meetings where local communities create the policies is a game-changing way of doing politics, from the bottom up, with their candidates simply a mouthpiece for the community. It does not use democracy as a vehicle to prop up the wider status quo. Democracy, rather, is a vehicle to transform the status quo. So, the 28 candidates that Assemble endorsed received over 60,000 votes between them, including Shokat Adam, who won in Leicester South with an Assembly campaign. These were short campaigns. We aimed to run many more grassroots chosen candidates, encouraging local people who never considered themselves politicians to offer their community that they would stand for Parliament. But when that snap general election was called, we quickly organised this game-changing way of doing electoral campaigning, and it was never just about the election. As planned, many Assemble campaigns from the election are already planning to reconvene their assemblies. People at these are confronting the issues that they are struggling with and coming up with a list of top things that they don't trust politicians to act on, like we've done today. City or town-wide assemblies will occur regularly every few weeks, travelling to different neighbourhoods in the region. The goal for each assembly group is to write a charter of 5 demands, which they will present to their local council. Local councils will be given a deadline to respond to the Assembly's demand, and despite having limited funding, councils do offer a means to open up confrontation with the state. If and when Assembly's demands aren't met by the council, Assembly groups can escalate however they choose to as a group. Campaigns will be promoted in the final stages of an assembly as possible pathways to power. These might include withholding or delaying bills, putting on rallies and demonstrations, organising sit-ins in the council building and running independents in local elections to gain control of the council with Assembly support. These campaigns come to form an alliance, and Assemble is working with many existing campaigns and NGOs to see how we can collaborate on our strategies. We, if nationally coordinate these strategies, could organise a direct confrontation between the growing movement against the government. For future elections, we are already working to inbuild assemblies from the emerging coalition. An alternative party for the next general election is being built, and we are in discussion with the independent candidates within Parliament already, who are beginning to discuss running people's forums as the way that they use their power. Once these assemblies have begun to organise a network of groups with campaigns, and the House of the People has been producing a wider vision, then there is basis to form a potential party structure, providing that there is strong enough incorporation of assemblies and democratic structures in the party. We really hope that assemblies are a channel to build a common vision in the context of widespread social disorganisation, polarisation and ideological confusion. And we need to build a form of long-term politics that can generate confidence in new political formations by building it from the ground up. We also want to support a process that brings new leaders to the surface, not the usual suspects, people who clearly represent their community and can stand as a representative for their neighbours. And we don't need to totally reinvent the wheel to do this. There are deep histories of community organising and experience, which is a deep well to draw on. Working with community leaders, proactively building deep relationships within existing community networks, holding cultural events, and from there people's enthusiasm builds when they have conversations in groups and want to bring their friends to the table. This kind of momentum-driven organising can be used to catalyse tipping points in society. With the broad emergence of a new social movement which aims to unite the campaigns across the political spectrum and to trigger defections within elites and institutions, we are challenging the outdated foundations of UK parliamentary politics. And we know that this can work because it's been done before. In 2016, the mayoral election was won in 4 weeks in Madrid by a small team centrally organising who owned the campaign. By the time of the election, there were 500 different posters put up around the city, and half of them were terrible. But it didn't matter because people owned the campaign themselves, and they won. Closer to home, in North Devon, 20 assemblies were held to decide on local issues and select candidates for the council. And after 6 months, the campaign won a majority of seats on the council. And the main reason communities said they voted for these candidates is because they simply were told on the doorstep by the candidates, "We are not them." While the far right are using this kind of rhetoric, "we are not them," to appeal to people's fear, posing a so-called exceptional alternative that really scapegoats the most vulnerable in society. Imagine if we came together for a common good, rooted in protecting all of us. So that's Assemble's electoral strategy, and now we're going to hear from our first speaker, Kamal, who's at the back.
We were in the process of setting up a party in Birmingham when Rishi Sunak decided to call the election. So a number of us who would have stood under the name of the party stood as independents. And we announced that before the concept of assemble had really reached us. So I faced the prospect of sitting with people around a table like today, where they wanted to go back to the beginning and select a candidate, when in fact I had announced already that I was standing and I was supported by groups. At least that was because of the nature of the last general election. But for the future, I think what is important to report back is at the doorstep in Birmingham, and I stood in an area called Birmingham Selly Oak, what people were saying was, number one priority, get rid of the Tories. Second was, we think we're going to vote Labour. When you talk to them about what an independent candidate can offer, they listened. But then they said, well, why aren't you standing with the Greens? Or under the Greens party, if you like, logo. So the thing that distinguished what I told them from the Greens and others was that I would set up an assembly in each ward. And that would collectively bring up to me as their MP the issues that I should be working on. And of course they would be different in Birmingham Selly Oak, to Birmingham Edgbaston, to Enfield North, or wherever. And that then I would report back to them. And I have to say, at the doorstep, that found favor, because they are lacking trust in politicians. They think the political system is broken, the two-party system, and therefore I think there was an openness to listen to the issue of assemblies. But it's going to be hard work, because people will tend to eventually gravitate back towards the party that they have voted for in the past. And I did say to a few people before at the last election that if no independents are elected, we will have the two-party system for 50 years. Luckily, 4 have been elected, and there's a responsibility on their shoulders to show that you can run things differently when you are not bound by a party whip. Because that's the biggest problem we have in this country, I believe, is the party whip. So I was pleased to hear that you're talking to some of the independent candidates, and certainly those of us who might consider standing in the future, I think would be up to discussing this further. We do need a change in the political system. We know what's going to happen. Labour may serve 2 terms, then there'll be no money in the kitty to hand over to the Conservatives. They will come in, there'll be no money left over to hand over to the Labour Party. We need a change in this country, but we'll have to work really, really hard to convince people who are not political, in the sense that we are here because we're really political. We follow everything, we know who the leaders are. There are people who didn't even know who their MP was in Birmingham City. So it's hard work, but I think this must be the right way to bring about representation. Thank you so much.
Assemble's independent candidate in the general election for Leighton and Wanstead. Chanel is a deeply rooted community organiser who left the Labour Party because she was deeply disappointed, to put it one way, with Labour's stance on Gaza, on cuts to community funding, and on their lack of accountability to the people they claim to represent. So please give a warm welcome to Chanel Johnson.
Well, this is nerve-wracking. Firstly, thanks to the organisers for putting this together. It's beautiful to see so many wonderful faces here today, and I'm really glad that I got to follow you, Kamal, because he mentioned the very reason why I left Labour. It's called the whip. So for me, the system is so flawed. How is it plausible that you can come in as a Labour councillor, as I did, and not be permitted to speak? And that's why I left Labour. It didn't make any sense to me. I came to represent my community, my people, the people that I grew up with, the people that I understand. And yet, while as a Labour councillor, I was not permitted to do so. And I said, do you know what? This isn't right. and I wrote a resignation letter, which I only circulated internally, and somebody in and amongst my quote-unquote team leaked it to the press. And I suddenly ended up poster girl in the area for the person that was willing to speak out against all of the things that were fundamentally flawed. I didn't want there to be any ambiguity. I wrote a letter that explained, this is why I cannot be a part of this party anymore. And it listed a whole host of things. I didn't expect to see that by 2 hours after I'd sent it. Just 2 hours. A friend in India rang me on WhatsApp and he said, Chanel, have you just quit? Bearing in mind I'd written the letter and taken a nap. So then for it to have got to India within 2 hours, I couldn't believe it. That weekend I thought it was going to be peaceful, oh no. And it was then that I started to make sure that I understood what it meant to be an independent, because I did it just from here. I didn't know what it meant to be an independent. I didn't know what it meant to not be part of the party machine. And I felt a lot lighter from that point forward, and the journey just continued. So, for me, as an independent councillor, I don't get a say. I'm not going to stand here and tell you any different. I don't get a say. I sit in the chamber. I'm not permitted to speak on anything because it's all done by the party machine. However, just by being there, showing that it can be done, sometimes makes a difference. And they didn't know what hit them when I decided to run as an MP. And that only happened on the 1st. Yep, Tarek signed my paperwork and I ran and handed it in to the electoral office. And on the 1st of June, right the way through, 35-day campaign, absolute most mad days of my life, but mad and good all at the same time. Because we needed to be the difference that people can see. And this is where, for me, truly trying to explain to people what it meant to be an independent candidate was really the hardest thing. Because people would still say to you, yeah, but what party? No, none. No, but you can't. You know, you've got to be a part of something. I am a part of something. I'm part of this community. And by being an independent candidate for you means I can represent us. Oh, you need to come out and vote. Oh, okay then. It was that message that we needed to get across that was the key. So when you look at moving things forward and just trying to get across to people what it means to be an independent, keep that in the forefront of your minds, because most people don't understand that. The second thing they don't understand is assembly. What does that word connotate for most people? School, strict. Oh, assembly, sit down and have a talking shop or be spoken at. Yeah, people just being talked at. That's what it represents for most people. So when you say come to a public assembly, oh no, I'm not doing that, a waste of time. So there's two big myths that you have to dispel. And we was doing that on the doorstep, we was doing that at the stations, we was doing that in the streets. And it worked out really well for us because after 35 days of campaigning, we got 10% of the vote share from nothing. We ran 3 assemblies. We even had the local football club give us their space to run the assemblies. And easily would have cost us £2,000, which we didn't have. That was only negotiated when I explained to him, we're doing this for the community. Just put politics to one side for a second. We're doing this to listen to the community. Oh, right then, love, you can have it. Yeah, the football executive suite. Yeah, for us, the community. So it's things like that. It's building those connections in the community that's absolutely essential. So I'm just going to leave you with just a few things, which is about going forward. So from this point forward, it's about building the networks and building the people in the community that are doing the things and that have got the connections, and it's having those wider conversations and asking them to have the conversations with the people that they engage with. These are your food bank workers, these are your teachers, these are your football coaches, whoever they are, reach them. Because democracy is democracy for all of us, and not being a part of that and being alienated from it is what we've seen, and it's what we've got to try to stop. So I'm going to leave it there.
Before the food and music arrived, attendees deliberated over what areas the House of the People should focus on addressing in the future. Issues previously highlighted at local assemblies included the genocide in Gaza, economic inequality, the NHS, and the climate crisis. After discussions, participants voted for their priorities. For more on how to get involved with assemblies, check out the accompanying Canary article about the launch and see Assemble's own action plan. And of course, please share the Canary's work as widely as possible.